I think that many of us as females find sexism is so normalized, whereas people of color, black, brown, whatever, when we hear a racist joke or racism spoken not as a joke, we really feel assaulted in our sensibilities. But sexism is such a woven into the fabric of our daily lives that I think it's harder for people to resist.
The first thing I want to talk about with Bell Hooks is that she died in 2021. And at the time, I was living in China, so it was a big shock. And as I mentioned to Roger, my folks are only 2 years younger than her, and so that really like put a lot of perspective in my mind, not only of like what she had achieved within her lifetime, but that I guess I don't think that I feel like my parents have so many more years. And so it was a very shocking moment. I just want to say, I chose bell hooks for our theorist because she died, and the legacy that she created is so influential that it continues beyond her death. We formulated 3 questions, and our first question is, what is feminism? Do you want to go first, Roger?
When I think of the term feminism, I automatically think of Black women and the role that they play. I was raised in the Black church, and while most people would say it's not the most feminist supporting place, which there is the role of women in the Black church is extremely important. They're the backbone. And since I was very sheltered and since I was raised in a church, I got the opportunity to learn from nothing but women. And once I decided to leave religion, once I got into college, I had the opportunity to see how other men would treat women. And that's just something that was never taught to me. I was always taught that as a male, you provide. And these are, once again, very traditional standards that I see the flaws in. I was taught that you have to provide. I was taught that you cook and then you feed everybody. And then, as a male, you eat last and you reverence the woman and you do all these different things. And while those are traditional views that have their flaws, like I said, it was my first introduction to feminism as far as standing up for women, being that helpmate, being that extra voice. So that was like my accidental introduction to feminism. But as I started to date more, as I started to read more while I was in college, that's when I really started to understand that it's more than just that. You have to raise your voice, and where there is an injustice, you have to speak up, definitely when it comes to how women are treated. In particular, definitely Black women. So when I think of feminism, it is standing up for womanhood and making sure that women are treated as fairly as possible. So whether it is making sure that women have access to the same levels of education as males, resources, the same resources as males, same job opportunities and protections at the workplace. All those are things that come to my mind when I think about feminism. There's a lot of parallels between being Black, a Black male, and being a woman in a way. One conversation I was having with somebody, and they were talking about, and they are a woman, and they were talking about how when they walk down the street, they have to look both ways, or when they get in the car, they have to look behind to make sure nobody's in their car, and how they have to do certain things to make sure they're safe when they're walking down the street. And I tell them, to a certain extent, I do the same thing. There's certain things I have to do when I'm walking down the street to protect myself, because there's certain ways that people react to me when they see me walking down the street. So learning about feminism, having those conversations with people makes me realize that there's a certain role that I need to play at my workplace.
It's interesting because my brother is the one who introduced bell hooks to me. And
Mhm.
I honestly think he's a bigger feminist than I am, which is kind of interesting. He's a cinematographer and a professor at UC Santa Cruz. So I'm constantly talking to him about different things. But I guess what I want to kind of say about this concept of feminism is my brother introduced her book, Teaching to Transgress. And it's interesting because I read that just after Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Freire. And that's whom she is like super influenced by with the concept of freedom within education. But what was more interesting about Teaching to Transgress and what bell hooks gave me with feminism is how to question everything. And this includes the role and identity of a woman as a teacher, classroom management, and how to embrace your students. All of these things, I think, are encompassed in the idea of feminism and this idea of equality within the classroom. Um, I have to accentuate, though, that she also made me understand what it means to be a white woman, and
Mhm.
specifically within the context of education. The
Okay.
second question we came up with was, how do you identify with feminism as an educator?
So as an educator, it's my goal to make sure that everyone feels comfortable in my classroom. Well, part of that is acknowledging that I am a Black male.
Mm.
So like knowing some of the stereotypes that students may hear about Black males and knowing that I'm usually the first Black male that they meet, I had to help them unlearn and feel comfortable around me. I feel like that's one way that feminism kind of helps in a way, because it knows I know my position or how they may view me. I mean, it makes me a lot more self-aware. So my main goal is to make sure that the young ladies that walk into my classroom have the same opportunities as the males that come into my classroom. I feel like automatically the males are drawn to me because I'm younger, because I'm Black, because I think hip is such a lame word, but other teachers will refer to me as hip because I am, a younger teacher. But it's always my goal to make sure that the young ladies as well feel that same amount of comfort and equality in my classroom. So as an educator, I want to make sure that definitely when I teach history, we talk a lot of males. I want to bring up the female perspective as well. I want to make sure that I also empower them, making sure their voices get heard, whether it is calling on them in class or giving them the opportunity to express how do they feel hearing nothing about women in the curriculum. Like I said, I try to make sure that every young lady that walks into my classroom feels comfortable, and then outside the classroom, also goes with my colleagues that are female. I want to make sure that they feel comfortable as well too. So whether that is advocating for them, if I see that there's some type of workplace injustice.
The thing that I didn't mention with our previous question with what is feminism is something that I think also complements this question as how to identify with feminism as an educator. And I noted that bell hooks specifically made me understand what it is to be a white woman as different from um, like all women, and the accessibility that you have from it, and the privilege that you get as from being a white woman, even though it's considered a minority. So without making me feel like a horrible human being born white, which is not something that I can necessarily control, she was able to explain to me my privilege and how that alters the oppression that I should acknowledge as a woman in defining the difference between Black feminism and white feminism. Like it's essential to understand like what your presence brings to the classroom. Yes, I'm young. Yes, I have blue hair, although I'm not that young. But yes, I have blue hair. Yes, I am a woman. Yes, I have all these other things to me, but I'm still a white woman at the end of the day. And I
Mhm.
teach my mostly minority children. And I have to be I have to acknowledge what that means and what that represents, and so that builds upon this trust factor of what I have to create, like that
Mhm.
first step before I do anything else within the classroom. Education goes beyond just the student. It goes, and
Mhm.
specifically with bell hooks, it's how the teacher translates and provides an environment, a spiritual environment for the student.
Mhm.
So how do we allow the environment to influence this community that you create with the student? So another thing I want to say is Bell Hooks is not her actual name. It's her
Right.
pen name.
Yeah.
And that was influenced by her great grandmother, but also just kind of like a representation of the women of the time.
Mhm.
And specifically, bell hooks is written in lowercase. I don't know if anyone ever saw me do that or question, like, what's the wrong
Yeah.
with Evie, that she's always writing bell hooks in lowercase. But
Yeah,
she,
I looked up and saw
yeah,
why.
very purposeful about doing that. And the reason why is because she just wanted to choose humility,
Right.
and this specifically has very much influenced me as an educator, but also as someone who is trying to decolonize education, and
Mhm.
my own struggle as being white and kind of separating myself as a settler from colonizing education. And so because of it, and because of this, I choose to write white in lowercase because I
Mhm.
think it is super important as a move towards decolonizing curriculum. So our last question, we wanted to keep it simple. Our last question is, how is feminism incorporated into your classroom?
I'll go ahead and start this off if you don't
Okay,
mind.
no, go for it.
Um, One of the biggest things I like to do is expose how life is going to change once my students graduate high school. A lot of students that I work with, they have this traditional idea that the man always has to be in charge. It can be something as simple as when I leave the classroom to use the restroom, I'll put somebody in charge, and I usually pick a female student to kind of see what would happen, what would kids say to start a conversation. And a lot of the boys complain, right? And the thing that I usually say that is that, well, if you think about the students that usually make the best grades in my class, it's usually my students who are young ladies. And that starts another conversation. And we stop and we talk. And I say that, the past valedictorians of our campus have all been female. They've all been women. And when it's time for them to go into the workforce, why is it that they end up working for males that they did better than academically in middle school and in high school? So giving students those little examples of how, once you make it into the quote unquote real world, there's a shift in, not allowing women to excel how they should be able to excel. That's one way that I implement feminism in my classroom, just giving those real world examples. As far as teaching history, I always try to bring up other actors in history that happen to be women, whether it's during the civil rights movement, because women don't get talked about enough during the civil rights movement, or definitely in some of the major wars throughout US history, because there's some major women who happen to be Black that just don't get talked about at all.
So the first thing I kind of like want to mention is how bell hooks really like cultivated the classroom,
Mhm.
you know, and something that's like really important is that she really addressed ethics of care uh,
Mhm.
within the classroom. It was a very big thing, and she pointed the lens specifically towards the rights of the student.
Mhm.
But also within that balance, she was very targeted and said it's the responsibility of the teacher to provide those rights for the student. Another thing that she was really big about is that uh, she was adamant about finding, quote unquote, the spiritual within either the moment or within the spirit of the student. And that it is the responsibility of the teacher to hold that ideology as the essence of the classroom. And that's why I think I loved teaching to transgress so much, because I just thought that it was basically like this sentiment that you should only be a teacher if you love being a teacher. And if you don't love being a teacher and you don't love this environment that you are creating for these students, then get out. It's not the
Mhm.
place for you, because you're going to do more damage than you are good. And
Right.
you're not there to be invested in these students' lives, you know. And I loved that she, although I'm not religious myself, she was very much into this idea of this like spiritual essence of like bringing that out and holding what the child or the learner or the student is capable of doing. And, you know, we're not all there every day. We don't have our best day every day. You know, we have different things going on in our own lives. But it's very important that this choice that we made as an educator is to be there for the student and to help the student and see the student and be there with the student if we're going to be there. And I just felt like that I just have connected so much with bell hooks on that concept and what I try to bring into the classroom every day.
All right. One last thing I would like to like add or even ask is, what's the best way for a male to be a feminist? How can we be allies? How can we support? I think one of my issues in struggling to get my words and my points across, I can see myself doing the actions, but it's hard for me to articulate it. If we're talking about something that I feel comfortable about, like race relations or what it means to be an African American male, it's very easy for me to talk about that because I have firsthand experience of doing so. And as far as me as being a feminist, I try my best to make sure that the women around me feel supported, feel loved, that even in my political decisions, I'm making the decisions that are going to protect women, in particular Black women, because I live and been raised around Black women. So, how do I become that better feminist? How do I articulate myself better when it comes to feminism? Because my actions hopefully show that I'm doing my best, but sometimes my words may not come across like I am.
My brother used to wear a t-shirt, and he probably still does. I'm a feminist, you know. I think the first big step is acknowledging that men can be feminists too. That it's not just this movement to acknowledge the rights of women as equal rights. That to be a feminist is to acknowledge that everybody has equal rights. You know, and I think if you can bring that up as a topic within your classroom and you say to your students, I'm a feminist, you know, and then have that conversation and them actually understanding what feminism means, I think that's one of the first steps into going about doing it. I also think that it's this concept of um you need to accentuate the problem or the issue before you can get an equal stance of everything. So that's very important, to be able to provide the rights for women and acknowledge the rights for women. But then how to really emphasize feminism is what comes after that as well.
Right.
How do we make feminism a prosperous and successful society for all of us to live in? And if I think of anything else, I'll let you know. Or those who are watching our awesome presentation, let us know this question that Roger has come up with. All right. I have one kind of closing statement.
Mhm.
I said, ultimately, I think why bell hooks is not considered a heavy hitter in the academia theorist world. Like, she wasn't one of our options to pick from.
Mhm.
I was very adamant about wanting to pick her, is because she resonates so strongly with the common everyday world. She's acknowledged beyond academia and questions our existence and how we love and how we can exist as a society. That's just kind of like my closing statement.
That was great.
Thank you.
One last thing I want to say, I really like how you broke down that feminism, at its core essence is all about equality and for all. Um, and that's really what people want. But I really want to do a better emphasis on being a better feminist and learning more about, how to be a better feminist. And I think that's what this journey is all about. Definitely at the PhD level, there's going to be certain things that we're really strong at, and we all have our expertise or our niche, that one thing that we get. And I really want to start emphasizing the things that I don't get, because I want to be a better educator. And I would just want to support, the women around me a lot better than I have been.
That's great.